Hello everyone, this is part 36 of What If Naruto was in Anbu at 6, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Oh my head. Were the words that scraped across Akina's T as the pressure between her temples gave her the agonizing pulsing sensation of a migraine. Her eyes slowly opened to a beige ceiling and slowly rotating fan, its edges squeaking with every revolution. The young woman moved to sit up, pausing as a sharp stinging sensation shot through her stomach. In her mind, a vision of fire-laced red eyes and the feel of cold steel made her jump with a start. Naruto. Her hands, once she was fully upright on her bed, found their way to her stomach, recognizing that the clothes on her were not her own, and the feel of freshly changed bandages beneath the oversized shirt made itself known. The door to her room suddenly opened, revealing a woman in her late 30s or mid-40s. Judging from her looks, she wore simple clothes and had black, waist-length hair. Oh my, you're awake? One moment, I'll get you some food. Before Akina could even open her mouth to say any kind of protest to her leaving, the door was closed and the sound of shuffling feet indicated the woman's departure. Akina closed her mouth before she glanced around the room. The door was on the other side of the room to the right, and the window was directly across from it to the left. A closet was directly in front of her. Dragging her legs over the edge, the young woman stood up, ignoring the renewed burning pain in her stomach. Why hadn't the injury healed yet? She'd have to examine it herself later. Walking to the window, she looked down onto the bustling market below. This woman lived in what was considered prime real estate, so she had quite a bit of money, or at the very least a stable enough income. Still, that's not what caught her eye. It was the fact that she didn't recognize this location, and that set her on edge. There were not a great deal of places in Kumo or Suna that she hadn't been to. In Kumo, taking missions as per her training had taken her all across the Lightning Country. And in Suna, her image as Suna's angel had taken her just as far as every outlying village and garrison in trouble had been begging for her to come to their aid against Konoha's raids. So, where was she? Considering where the battle had taken place. She could be anywhere on the northeastern side of the mainland, or, if her luck was really crappy, she could be on one of Kiri's islands. Sneaking on a ship here wouldn't be difficult. The problem was that all ships from Kiri that headed to the mainland docked at Konoha's sole port, Wave Country. And in Wave Country there were teams of ninja that checked the ship. Rumor had it the teams even had Anbu hidden in their ranks to make sure nothing got past them. It would be difficult to get away from them undetected, and in a place like Wave Country, that had essentially only one entrance and one exit, she couldn't afford to be detected at the docks. Of course, she'd first have to discover just where the hell she was at in the first place before she could make any plans of escape. She'd have to ask that woman once she got back. Walking back over to the bed, her legs feeling unbelievably weak after the virtual nothing that was that walk. Just how long had she been unconscious? As she sat down on the edge of the bed, the woman entered the room again, this time carrying a tray with some reheated food. The smell of food seemed to shoot up her nose, and Akina became acutely aware of just how hungry she actually was. She swallowed thickly, hoping that she wasn't staring openly at the food as the woman approached. Placing the tray on the nightstand next to the bed, the woman smiled kingly at her. Here ya go, eat up. The temptation to do just that was almost overwhelming, but she managed to hold back as she turned her eyes upwards towards the black-haired woman. I'm sorry, but how did I get here? Who are you? Of course I'm sorry. My son, Inari, found you while he and his crew were out on their fishing ship. He brought you back here. My name is Tsunami, the woman said, smiling with a slow nod. You're in my house, obviously, in Wave Country. Naruto slowly made his way down the beach, the gentle caress of the waves, scratching the sands almost soothing to the chronically aggressive Jinchuriki. This would mark the 4th day he'd been on the island with Temari and Hinata, 6th since he himself had been there alone. Now here, away from Temari, Hinata and the world in general, Naruto was free to indulge his thoughts freely. With the almost certain fall of Kumo, only Suna now remained. He couldn't plan the invasion here though, he needed to gain a full assessment of his enemy's losses, along with his own, along with other factors that could shift the tides before he did that. No, his thoughts revolved around the future beyond that. The world of the ninja as they knew it, was being teared away, villages and the various factions and warmongering ways becoming a mere thing of the past. This was his ultimate goal. This is what his mission entailed. But this was something the Jinchuriki found himself strangely unsettled by. He had grown up in this world, and this way of living, these wars, this constant need to keep on one's toes, it's what he knew, it was all he knew. Peace. It was a goal becoming more and more possible with each passing day. But at the same time, it became all the more imposing. Akina's words during the recent battle returned to him, her voice echoing in his mind. You want to end it here, like this, with this battle because you know some will escape and you know that when they do some may surrender, but many will continue the fight against you. You don't want the fighting to end, you want it to go on, because you're absolutely terrified of the notion of a world without war. A world where you would have no purpose. Naruto's eyes closed briefly as he let the memory play through his mind, so vivid the image was. It was as if it were happening all over again. Foolish girl. Whatever trepidations or uncertainties he may feel, whatever foolish feelings of unease plagued him, he would bear through it. Because it was his oath, his mission, his purpose. Continuing his silent march, the Uzumaki did not take long to find himself approaching the beach at the cave's entrance, eyes immediately finding Temari standing on the beach, arms crossed in front of her as the gentle breeze blew against her, catching her hair and fluttering her clothes. Making his presence known by allowing his footsteps to make a sound, Naruto marched towards her, watching as her attention was brought towards him fully. The Jinchuriki paused, glancing around for a moment before he spoke. Where is Hinata? Inside, still resting. Temari answered simply before she turned her eyes back to the horizon. Naruto nodded and, deciding that nothing would be of benefit by remaining out here staring at the horizon with the Sabaku, he turned towards the cave, ready to leave her to her own devices. Before he fully turned away, however, Temari's voice brought him to a pause. What did you mean yesterday when you said your body wasn't used to the Kyuubi's chakra? The question was simple, almost as though its subject was an innocent, inconsequential matter. Quick and to the point. He never did take her for one to dance around the subject. Looking over his shoulder, his gaze finding the back of her head, he spoke. It's just what it sounds like, Miss Sabaku. Yesterday you insinuated that my physical body is accustomed to the Kyuubi's chakra enough to feel no ill effects. This is untrue. I merely corrected you. Do you feel pain every time you use even a little bit of it? The Sabaku questioned, turning to face him now. He nodded once, still not quite understanding where she was going with this line of questioning. Is it the same for all Jinchuriki? Ah, you are concerned for your brother, I see. Naruto commented with an air of realization in his voice. What is that supposed to mean? She questioned, hostility in her tone. Nothing at all, he stated with a shrug. It was the truth, it meant nothing to him, merely an observation of her motivations. I suppose, he continued, all Jinchuriki feel discomfort when they use the Bijuu's chakra. Though, based on the nature of the chakra, they should all feel distinct, or unique in their own way. Mere speculation though, I do not have two Beiyu and have never been in contact outside of a battle, so I have not engaged one in conversation. What do you feel? Naruto glanced towards her, an eyebrow raised in curiosity. What I feel? Odd, he realized. She was the only person to question him over how using the chakra of the Nine Tails felt like. Others all speculated, all had their theories no doubt. But none had ever fully questioned him, either out of fear, or respect to his privacy, it mattered not, for he cared not. No. No, wait, there had been another that had asked him, one other individual. Suddenly Temari's messy blonde hair was replaced by sleek black, stormy silver-gray eyes shifting to gentle blue before the vision vanished, as if whisked away on the breeze. Why do you ask? He found himself questioning. Temari avoided his gaze for a moment before she sighed and sat down on the sand, arms resting on her raised knees. I don't know, guess, because it's interesting, because you're like the only person to really talk to right now. I'm curious. Any answer I guess can fit right now. A silence descended over the two for a moment as Naruto stared down at the back of her head before turning fully and standing at her side. Do you perhaps feel as though you may understand your brother's burden better through me, Sabaku? Is this what stems your questions? I guess, she said after a moment with a soft shrug and another tired sigh. I've never. I mean, Gaara's always tried to be there for me and Kankuro, you know. Always tried to be supportive and help us out. I guess he felt guilty about what he is now that I look back at it. But why would he feel that way? We never brought it up, never treated him any different, at least. I don't remember doing that, or tried not to. I don't know. I guess, I just wanna be able to understand him a bit more. She snorted humorlessly. Kinda pathetic really, that I'm coming to you of all people with this. Naruto again continued to stare at the top of her head for a good long while before crossing his arms and stared out to the horizon. My experiences are different from your brother. As is my Bayu, I cannot speak for him. He answered. Could you just tell me about your experiences then? She asked, and Naruto again turned to stare at her. Feeling his gaze searing into the top of her head, she turned to look at him, easily seeing the unveiled suspicion in his blue depths. What does it matter if you tell me? I can't use it against you, the weakness exists or doesn't whether or not you tell me, and it's not something I can exploit like a weak arm or sprained ankle. You operate perfectly with it obviously. Naruto continued to stare at her, raising a thin skeptical eyebrow. While it is true you cannot exploit this fact for your own benefit, just as it is true I cannot exploit your own brother's physiological weakness to his Bijuu's chakra, your sudden, apparently innocent interest in me Sabaku is enough suspicion in itself. Temari huffed, her head jerking to the side in an angry, dismissive manner. Oh, for F's sake, she yelled, standing up as she rounded on him. Now you look. I am. See off from any form of human contact by 10 trillion gallons of sea water. Stuck on a spit of dirt barely a mile across, and the only other form of conversation besides you that I have available to me is a woman that's unconscious 18 hours a day, so either you drop all this F suspicion or you'll do what? He questioned softly, his voice vibrating through her as he turned to face her now, staring down into her eyes as he see her off mid-sentence. Whatever words Temari was ready to release S in her tea as she apparently remembered just who she was talking to. But, nevertheless she continued to stare straight at him, never breaking eye contact as she returned his glare full force. It was another brief silence that descended upon him, and Naruto's eyes once again seemed to see a woman that was not there, her hair and eyes shifting and changing before his eyes before they vanished as though they'd never been there. It burns, Naruto stated after a brief moment. Caught completely flat-footed, the Sabaku could only blink stupidly for a moment in response. Wah! The Kyuubi's chakra. It burns, channeling it through the Tenketsu, attempting to focus and harness it into whatever you want. It is like wielding a Kaiten jutsu in your hand with no chakra coating your palms. It can be blocked out, managed. But it never truly leaves. I imagine your brother experiences something similar. Temari seemed to stagger for a moment, sputtering out incohesive sentences as she struggled to grasp a response. Finally, after pausing, and taking a deep breath, she spoke. Then why use it? Why do all Jinchuriki keep using it? Once again, you demand answers which I cannot give. I know not why others have relied on the creatures. I can only speak for myself. Then why did you use it, if it was so painful? Why didn't you just rely on your own chakra? It was my responsibility, he answered, to learn and master this chakra. Your responsibility? She questioned incredulously. My village would need me prepared if there was ever a war upon our capital. My training in how to control the Bayu chakra commenced immediately after I passed my personal Chunin exam. Personal exam. But you took the exam with us. I remember. You already knew how to use the Kyuubi's chakra by then. I know where we met was nothing more than a mission given to me by Lord Hiruzen. The Sandaime. He wished extra protection for the last loyal Uchiha and the Hyuga heiress. Sharingan Kakashi is known for his fame, and Serenia or would be K would focus on him. Not an as of yet unknown Anbu out of uniform. You were an Anbu back then. I would have thought that was obvious. Naruto stated. My skills were far beyond those of yourself, or your brother. Gaara was stronger than any Genin too, but he wasn't. When did you take your personal exam? If I recall correctly, Naruto stated with a slow contemplation. I was 4, I believe. You were 4 years old. The Suna Kanoiki almost yelled, eyes wide and mouth agape. Indeed, he answered simply. Shortly after my training commenced, I received a Junin promotion, and was soon inaugurated into the Anbu Corps. My training with the Nine Tails continued until I seized control of Konoha. After that, formal training ended, and I merely had to learn from my experiences on the battlefield. Now that was a subject Temari didn't approach. His conquests and subjugations of the Central Plains were well known throughout the world. It was where he had gained his reputation as the Devil King. Not a subject she wanted to get into. So for my own experience, Naruto continued, it has always been a matter of responsibility. I always needed to master the chakra if I hoped to guard my village against its enemies. Other Jinchuriki I imagine feel the same way, or simply rely on the chakra because they feel as though it is the quickest way to achieve strength, then it becomes their only way to achieve strength. Quote. Temari stared up at him, mouth still agape, and only until Naruto turned to stare at her did she regain her wits enough to realize she was staring. Glancing away from him, the Suna ninja cleared her tea. I see, she said awkwardly. Naruto glanced out towards the horizon, realizing just how late it was becoming. He needed to return to the cave, prepare it for the chill of the night that would no doubt assail Hinata. Turning swiftly, he began making his way back to the cave, leaving Temari alone to her own confusing thoughts. Halt, was the loud yell that brought the entire column of shinobi to a halt with a single resounding brum of thousands of footfalls before they all stopped. At the head of the column Kakashi stood, Saken, Kidomaru and Tayuya at his side as they surveyed a rather disturbing scene in the rocky beach ahead. Spread across the expanse of land were several large craters and jagged trenches, small trees down, their branches broken or see. But what truly caught their attention was the two already sickly pale, flies gathering over the decomposing bee. Normally this scene would have caught their attention for just a brief moment and the column would have moved on. The armor on one of them and the unique blades that rested next to them were more than enough for Kakashi to call the entire column to a halt. This alone would have been enough even if he couldn't recognize the two faces, frozen and slightly deformed in death as they were. The copy ninja made his way closer, uncovering his Sharingan to regard this entire scene to memory, the other three following closely behind. As he reached an area between the two he glanced at one. Ginchiko. Then to the other. Mika. The names were spoken in a contemplative manner as Kakashi continued to survey the scene. Finally, after a few minutes, Kidomaru spoke. Orders, boss. Kakashi med for a moment. Order the column to camp here for tonight, get the best trackers in the unit, along with those familiar with investigations. Bring them here. Then, get Ginchiko's armor, her sword and Mika's weapons. We'll bring them to Konoha for a proper burial. After that, burn the bee, we can't risk any diseases spreading to the troops because of decomp. Yes sir, the three chorused before going off to do the duties. Kakashi once again allowed his eyes to trail across the scene of this apparent battle. Something was wrong here, this felt entirely too off for his comfort. Akina slowly made her way down and across the roads of Wave Country, using a minor genjutsu to change her facial appearance. It was more advanced than the henge, considering that it was more subtle, harder to detect. She kept her eyes peeled for any ninja house or small base. She found their checkpoints rather easily, mainly focused around the bridge and docks. The docks wouldn't be her problem, no, her problem was the bridge. That was the kicker to get out of here. Though the bridge had less security than the docks, they still had security. Security that she wasn't sure she could bypass completely undetected, considering how many experienced ninja they could have hidden in the fodder of Chunin that manned the security. She would have to ask Tsunami's son. What did she say his name was? Inari. She'd have to ask how he got her through the dock checkpoint without the Leaf Ninja knowing, or why he would do it. Still, the latter was more moot than anything. She could use the answers to the first question in order to get herself past the bridge guard, maybe anyway. Of course she had to be careful, they may not know she was a ninja from a neighboring village and simply helped her thinking she was a civilian that had been shipwrecked. She'd have to find a way to break the question without seeming too suspicious. If not, she'd just have to come up with a plan of her own. Speaking of Tsunami, the woman stated that she could return to the home if she wished, that there would be a place waiting for her. Akina hated to take advantage of this obvious show of generosity, but she found herself currently with no money, no food, no equipment to get food, and with the need to keep a profile so low it should be considered subterranean, so she'd have to swallow her reservations about taking their charity with a promise to pay them back someday. Of course, some part of her had to question just why they were doing this for her, and if their intentions were truly as innocent as they seemed, but that part she smothered down with the logic that if they really wanted her, they would have sold her out long ago. She diverted her eyes away from the cloaked sentries of Konoha as she began to make her way back to the house, arriving without incident only a few minutes later. Parting the open front door, she allowed herself into the house, hesitant steps taking her further inward, glancing around the decently furnished living room towards the empty kitchen, where she could smell the food already over the stove. Akina listened for sound of movement, finding it several seconds before the woman, Tsunami, entered through a door at the foot of the stairs. "Oh, Akina-san, you've come back," she said with a surprised but nonetheless pleasant smile. "If you would wait but a few minutes, the food will be ready." Sure, thanks," the Tsunokonoiki stated somewhat awkwardly, watching the woman walking towards the kitchen. You need help or something?" she added as the woman disappeared behind the kitchen wall. "Oh no, thank you, take a seat, relax for a bit, it'll be done in just a few moments," the older woman called from the kitchen. When he descended, his feet hit solid ground before he felt the sensation of one of these creatures jump on him, gripping his back, arms wrapped around his neck. His cloak obscured his vision but not his hearing. Why, it in his ear before he threw him over his shoulder, allowing its body to hit the ground with a thud. They approached now, coming closer, he backed away feeling his back press against a wall. The fire on his blades grew, giving way to only a glimmer more of light, allowing him to see these things' faces and forms. They were human, burnt, the injuries were many, but all decidedly fatal. "Why?" one of the creatures before its counterparts chorused the statement. "Why did you kill me?" The voices came again, unorganized, at different volumes, some yelling, some groaning. He stood with his back to the wall, fire still dancing over his blades. He felt no fear from these creatures, no pity, no anger or horror. They were nothing but ghosts, ghosts who harbored neither memory or name for him, faces that melded together, meaningless to him. Light suddenly the darkness, blinding him with its brilliance. The of these creatures stopped, fading into nothing. He tried to open his eyes, to keep his guard up in order to see if one of these monsters approached to attack, but it was too bright. It actually physically hurt to keep his eyes open against the harsh glare. It away with the same ease as which it appeared, revealing only one person standing there, the person he knew and remembered all too well. "Yoshino," he said, voice a slightly deeper octave as he lowered his arms, letting them fall to his side. She walked forward, marching up to him at a slow languorous pace, her footsteps calm and steady as she stood only a few inches in front of him. He looked down on her, looking into her deep blue eyes as he'd done many times before her death. His hand moved of its own volition and soon the all-too-familiar sound of blade S through F reached his ears, the echoing splatter of B falling onto the floor resonating around him in this darkness, red eyes staring eerily into those of his unflinching victim. A blade of her own was held against his the tip, pressing firmly upon the center. She could have struck, but she did not, and he could see now, crimson B cascading down her clothing, staining it. As its essence eventually reached the ground, he saw more of her B falling from the corner of her closed mouth. "Tell me why." His voice echoed around them, hollow and distant. She didn't respond as she continued to meet his gaze before slowly bringing her head down to rest against his her warm B still trailing down his hand, which still gripped the hilt of the weapon that had her. She sighed, her free hand raising itself towards his face, her fingers a hair's breadth away, as if to give a gentle caress only for her to vanish from sight, her body dissolving into nothing in a sudden breeze, leaving him alone in this darkness with nothing but his blade and B hands. Naruto's eyes snapped open, his body giving a slight jump at the sudden arrival into the conscious world. The sound of a heavy downpour immediately assaulted his ears, the constant hiss of thousands of raindrops echoing almost deafeningly loud within the cave. He stood slowly, armor left behind before he made his way to the cave's entrance. He parted the barricade of twigs, dry tinder and grass he had made to keep the chill of the night out, finding himself immediately assaulted by water that seemed to be pouring down in sheets, the heavy impact of thick droplets as hard as stones against his skin. He paid it never mind stepping out into the cold night air, quickly resealing the entrance of the cave, his gaze traveling skyward before his feet carried him forward. When Temari opened her eyes, it was to the howling of the wind, the hiss of the rain and the crackle of the fire. She sat up, a curious wakefulness reaching her as she glanced around the cold cave, pushing away the red cloak that partially shielded her and Hinata from the biting chill before she stood, eyes adjusting to the cave, blinking owlishly before she found that Naruto was nowhere to be found. Curiously, she found his mask and gauntlets still resting at their place next to his sleeping niche. The Suna woman glanced around, curious as to where he could have gone. As far as she knew, he hadn't left the cave at all during the night. She'd wondered if it was because he was worried about Hinata's condition, and her exposure to the cold of the night. Regardless, his absence was something that she found odd. She placed her head back down, attempting to find sleep once again, only for the wayward state of unconsciousness to prove itself quite elusive. And so it was that after God knows how long that the Suna ninja sat up fully, getting to her feet, she began to make her way towards the cave entrance. She wasn't sure why she did it, God knows she wasn't gonna walk out in that rain by the sounds of it, but something was drawing her there. And as she made her way forward, parting the entrance barricade, her eyes found the man who was her enemy and her guard. Only it wasn't him. He stood alone, in the rain, clothes clinging tightly to his body, his hair, normally untamed and spiked, was now thoroughly soaked, falling limply downward. He was looking upwards, towards the black sky that poured rain over him. His back was to her, hands at his side. What the hell was he doing? Had he seen a ship? That's the only reason she could imagine anyone, even someone as nuts as him, standing in the rain for no reason whatsoever. He raised his right hand, bending his arm at the elbow so his forearm was parallel with the ground, right hand slightly to his side. Water trailed down his face and then in several small streams, dripping to the cold floor or down to his sea. He looked down towards his hand, the angle allowing her to catch a glimpse of his face as he stood in the rain. She had to stifle a small gasp that rose in her tea at the sight. His sky blues, a normally sharp, razor-edged blue that could ail the most tempered of people with their ferocity, and make the strongest of ninja turn away with a shudder, seemed vulnerable, open. Temari snapped the barrier to the entrance of the cave with a shudder, her breathing quickening in something akin to some kind of fear, a feeling, not entirely unlike guilt, worming its way through her stomach. She felt as though she'd been intruding on something private. It probably was very private to him, she realized. He probably wasn't someone to show his vulnerabilities to anyone, ever. She slipped back into the cave, the image of those eyes, his butt, yet not, burned into her mind for the rest of the night, even after she fell into a fitful sleep. Outside, Naruto's eyes remained fixed on his open palm, never noticing his hesitant watcher over the roar of the downpour, watching as the raindrops pelted against it with harsh little pitter-pats that shook the earth with the force with which they fell. Clear crystal water fell on his hands, the same water that trailed down his face, but to him, it was her B. It stained his hand, stained him, scarred him. He cared for none of the others, none of their fates, their faces, their memory, the names, they were nothing and they meant nothing. But no, not her. She stood out against the others, she meant something, her face, her memory, her name, she meant something, and it was not even his hand that had failed her. Raising his eyes back towards the heavens, he took a breath. Tell me why. Yoshino. Suzume sighed tiredly as she read through the dozens upon dozens of scrolls stacked onto the desk at which she sat. She didn't know how he did it, day after day, so stoically, not even cringing when she brought in more of the evil known now to her as paperwork. She's been at it for weeks, and she was ready to tear her hair out in frustration and sheer boredom. And he'd been at it for years. No wonder he was always so pissed off. As she was about to reach for the next scroll, the door to the office opened, a ninja calmly stepping through the open portal with another stack of scrolls in hand before he gently placed them atop the desk's surface. Suzume felt a pitiful sob rise in her tea as she let her head fall onto the desk with a heavy thump, her shoulders shaking as she struggled to stop her weary emotions. The Chunin allowed himself a pitying smile before bowing shortly and taking his leave. Suzume allowed herself to indulge in these crocodile tears for several moments, weeping for the injustice of it all, and her lot in having to remain shackled to this desk by the administrative evil. Finally, she see herself pitying short, reaching out with her hand, head still facing the desk, she felt for the next scroll. Only for her hand to come into contact with clammy, cold scales. Jumping with a resonating yell, Suzume's temporary chair rolled back until it hit the wall, eyes landing on a tiny black snake resting on her desk. I bear a message From the master, the reptile hissed, dragging out his words with its forked tongue. Suzume took a moment to compose herself, clearing her tea with a quick, hum, as she stood and straightened her blouse, hiding her nervousness at the creature's amber-colored eyes staring at her, following her every move. What message? She questioned. He is isolated, on an island near Kiri. It is deserted. He demands a ship BSSSS sent out to get him. This is the message I bear, my duty is done. And so with a quick, poof, the reptile vanished, leaving a slightly stunned Suzume standing in the office. Quickly marching to her desk and pressing the intercom, she spoke into it, getting a slight feeling of momentary elation as she realized that she was the one with a secretary now. Bring me the fastest ninja currently within the village. Jiraiya plopped himself onto the seat of a bar in Wave Country's red light district. Propping his cane up next to the wall, he made short work of ordering some sake. When the rice wine came, the Toad-san quickly served himself, and began to drink. The warmth of the alcohol trailing down his tea made him groan in satisfaction. He needed this drink. He was never one to be stressed out easily. His life as the former head of a country-wide spy network didn't really allow him to be stressed out. Stress meant that the situation was getting to you, and if the situation was getting to you, you'd make mistakes. He couldn't afford mistakes back then, or now really. But these last few days, with the battle, a missing Naruto, injured elites and an, as of yet, unknown result regarding the Battle of Kumo, Jiraiya couldn't help the level of anxiety and stress that bit into him with the strength of any snake summon. Mind if I join ya? Came a voice from his left. Bringing his attention towards the direction at which it came from, the Toad-san and found none other than Yoshihiro Shimazu to be standing on the spot, in full armor regalia, his warhammer firmly resting on his back. Not waiting for an answer, the Cage of Iwa took a seat, unstrapping his warhammer and placing it to lean against the wall next to Jiraiya's cane, and ordered himself a saucer of his own. Jiraiya stared at the former Tsuchikage, not saying anything as Yoshihiro slowly served himself some sake, eyes remaining fixed on the Toad Sage. You know why I'm here, the Tsuchikage said after taking a long satisfying gulp before placing the saucer on the table. You need to find your precious Hokage. If he's even. He's alive. Jiraiya interrupted. Right. You say that because you know that he very well better be. Are you threatening something, Yoshihiro? Jiraiya questioned, a dangerous lilt to his tone. Yoshihiro sighed before leaning forward toward Jiraiya. Let's get something straight, frog boy. You and I both know that the fact of the matter is that the single reason your alliance with my village, and especially the villages within the central marshlands, is held strong is because of everyone's fear of Naruto. If you eliminate him from the equation, everything is gonna go to hell, real quick. I can only do so much to stave off my village's anger towards yours, and eventually, without Naruto around to bully them, things will blow over in open rebellion. And not just in Iwa, in most villages you've bullied into submission. The only one you have any real strong standing in is Kiri, and don't think Suna will pass up the golden opportunity to finally knock you all down a peg or two. Jiraiya remained silent for several moments, taking a deep breath before he opened his eyes to stare at Yoshihiro. Again, are you threatening anything, Yoshihiro? The Tsuchikage smirked, a somewhat bittersweet tilt to his smile. No. Just warning you of the impending disaster you could have on your hands, he stated before standing up, taking another quick drink before he grabbed his warhammer, ready to leave the bar. And where do you see yourself standing in this whole, impending disaster? Another small, bittersweet smile. 6 feet underground feeding the maggots. Looking to Jiraiya, he shrugged. If everything blows up, I side with you, I side with them. He paused, his face losing all hints of humor. Either way, I'm S. A strained silence passed between the two before the Tsuchikage broke it again. My men and I will be leaving for Iwa tomorrow. God knows your Aburame is gotta be pulling his hairs out in frustration. Turning to leave, the Tsuchikage said one more thing over his shoulder. Find the kid, Jiraiya, unless you want this entire thing to be a waste and all these S to have been made for nothing. With those words said, the Tsuchikage made his way out of the bar, leaving the Toad Sage alone with his sake. Naruto stood over Hinata's unconscious form, bare hands checking her vitals as he ran a basic diagnostic with his limited medical knowledge. Temari sat close by, a worry in her eyes as she too looked over the unconscious Hyuga, though she left Naruto to do as he would without interruption. She didn't know any medical jutsu, and even if she did, she doubted he'd accept her help. Naruto, though donning his mask once again, could not hide the crease of his brow, or the hardness of his sea blue eyes. Her condition was deteriorating. She hadn't even been able to stay awake today, only reaching consciousness for a few minutes before slipping away. The poison had been slow for this past week and a half, but now it seemed as though it was either gaining momentum, or her body could no longer fight it off as effectively in these less than pristine conditions. Is she gonna be alright? Temari questioned after several minutes, eyes downcast. Despite the graveness of Hinata's situation, she still could not bring herself to look at Naruto in the eye after that rainy night 2 days ago. The thought that he of all people could look like that, so unguarded, so vulnerable, so human. As long as she had known him, even as children, this man had seemed like some omnipotent force of nature that could not be stopped. A living, breathing, walking nightmare that would destroy everything that stood in his path. To have actually seen something, anything that proved otherwise with her own 2 eyes had shook her more than she cared to admit. She knew about Stockholm Syndrome, she knew the symptoms, the process with which it could be achieved, and she had been disciplined against such things as best she could be, but she found the previously unwavering resentment towards this man faltering, its intensity ebbing away, like a blade hammered into dullness. She knew she couldn't dare let her guard down around him. He had proven on more than one occasion that he was willing to manipulate others. One only needed to listen to the rumors of how he subjugated Iwa in order to find proof of such. And though that fear of all this just being a manipulation by him was there, she couldn't, in her mind, believe that that look could be faked even by him, especially by him. His voice brought her out of her musings as he responded. Her temperature is rising, her heart rate is accelerated, pupils seem dilated, but I cannot tell for certain due to the fact that she's a Hyuga. When she was awake, there was a severe decrease in her cognitive abilities and she mentioned a nauseating feeling in her stomach. He paused, taking a deep breath. The poison is progressing, my knowledge in toxicology is limited. Temari looked to Hinata's sleeping face. The veins around her eyes, which could bulge with the activation of the Byakugan, were tinged blue, as if spreading from her eyes towards the rest of her face. Temari stood suddenly, marching resolutely out of the cave, Naruto staying behind, continuing to do all he could to help the Hyuga currently under his care. Meanwhile, somewhere on the mainland 7 individuals stood in a dimly, torch-lit room. Shadows seeping from the walls like tendrils, reaching across the empty space to envelop those within. Is everything prepared? Came Itachi's slow monotone, reaching out through the darkness to the others. The seals are in place, everything is prepared, we need only draw the remaining Jinchuriki to us, was the voice of Akasuna no Sasori. Which shall we target first, I wonder? The Nibi is the logical choice. She is the weakest of the remaining 3, and if we capture the other 2, their respective villages may just focus against us. You're an idiot, yay, came Deodara's response. Let's capture the weakest, that way the strongest knows we're coming. And that way he's ready to fight us off once we do show up, yay. Great plan, bold brain. Let's beat down the middleman. Everyone's eyes shifted to a spiral-masked individual, a heavy pause descending on him before Toby again broke it. Toby is sorry. I just wanna be different. Zetsu, the last Akatsuki member, melted away from the walls of the compound, his nearly 9-foot height, with the plant-like extensions that framed his shoulders, towered over the others in the room. The pale half of his face being only vaguely visible in the dim light. Kumo has fallen. The statement was blunt, was given no type of forewarning, simply thrown into the faces of all those present, bringing several amazed, disbelieving stares towards the Kusanyuke ninja. What was that? When did you hear this? Were the inquiries thrown given by Kisame and Pain respectively, to which Zetsu responded slowly. Kumo apparently fell 4 days to a week ago. Konoha's attack force left no survivors, and only now are rumors reaching our spies. I left to investigate myself, and indeed, the Lightning Village stands as little more than ruins and smoking rubble. A silence descended over the Akatsuki members, broken by Pain as the leader spoke. Then our plans will have to move ahead sooner than anticipated. Soon the final attack will initiate against Suna. We cannot risk the Kyuubi destroying the Shukaku or the Nibi. Looking towards Itachi, the blonde-haired man nodded in his direction. Organize your team, Uchiha. You will move out soon. So we're going after the Kyuubi first? Toby questioned uncertainly, which immediately initiated the previous argument Onka again, brought to a halt by Pain's voice once again. This bickering is pointless. But Pain-sama, Conan began. We need to plan our next strikes. All three of these Jinkyuriki, with circumstances as they are much stronger and will be much more well guarded than our previous targets. The ringed eyes turned to face her as its owner replied. As I said, the conversation is pointless, Conan. We will not be going after them one at a time. Temari once again found herself sitting at the mouth of the cave. Knees drawn up to her sea as she stared out towards the horizon as she'd taken to doing several times during her current week-and-a-half long stay on this island. Her thoughts were still running rampant across her mind, too quick, too jumbled to fully grasp and catalogue. She sighed, lowering her head so it rested at her knees. The crunching of sand beneath a book alerted her to the approaching Naruto. Maintaining her silence, she did her best to ignore his presence, however, an act that was only partially successful and, later futile once he opened his mouth. You have been rather quiet of late, Sabaku. The Jinchuriki drawled, tearing his eyes towards her. She stiffened, but only minutely, shoulders tensing before relaxing once again. There's just been nothing to talk about, what with the princess in there getting worse and all. Her condition, or lack of topics, has not stopped you before, Sabaku. He paused before stepping closer to her. Do not believe either that my need to focus on Hinata's condition impairs my ability to observe either. You avert your eyes from me and attempt to avoid drawing my attention as much as possible when I am near. So whatever it is that keeps you silent is something pertaining to me. And I would know what it is. Temari allowed her annoyance to take over for her defense. Looking up towards him, she curled her lips in distaste. Unlike what your obsessive, socially crippling need to categorize and catalog others' actions would have you believe, not everything revolves around you, buddy. Not everything, no, but this, most certainly. And I do not like others keeping secrets from me. He drawled. Don't make me force it from your lips. He added at her continued silence. Temari's lips thinned, looking away from him before she sighed. I saw you. Saw me? He questioned with a raise of his eyebrow, watching as she nodded. Yay. 2 days ago. You were standing out here in the rain. And for the first time since she had ever known him, the Sabaku saw him give a visible reaction to something someone had said. His back straightened, spine going ramrod straight, eyes widening and reeling as if he'd been struck by something. Somewhere inside her, Temari was in 2 different directions, one part of her actually gleeful that she'd managed to catch him off balance, the other part of her worried as to what his reaction would be once he got over his shock at her statement. Naruto, for his part, wasn't sure what he was really feeling, or if he should even be feeling anything at this turn of events. His indulgence that night 2 days ago was something he barely acknowledged himself. Furthermore, it was something private. He realized, logically though, that he had never expressed anything of the sort, and that Temari's witnessing of the event wasn't in any type of violation to such because she hadn't known that it was private in the first place. Whom he should be irritated at is himself, considering that he was foolish enough to let her sneak up on him. What were you? It was nothing. He interrupted sharply as he turned his back, beginning to walk away. Put it out of your mind, Sabaku. Temari balked, blinking before she shot to her feet, opening and closing her mouth for several seconds, as if fishing for words before she was able to find some kind of sentence. Why? I said. Naruto began, looking over his shoulder, catching her eye. Put it out of your mind. Before he proceeded walking away at a brisk pace. Temari watched him go, eyes narrowing, like something akin to a cat that had found a place to dig in her claws. Whatever that night had been all about, his reaction now was only more encouragement to find out what could shake up the Demon King of all people. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.